The village of Drakeston lay under a pale, oppressive sky, the air thick with the scent of rain. Its once vibrant streets were now hollow echoes of their former glory, cracked stone beneath the feet of those few who dared to remain. The villagers, once full of life, were reduced to wary shadows, retreating from the stranger in their midst. Among them was a lone figure, Alistair, his cloak tattered from days of travel, his face streaked with dirt and the weariness of vengeance. He moved with purpose, his eyes fixed ahead, never lingering on the familiar faces that turned away. The blacksmith's forge still smoldered in the distance, but the familiar clanging of iron on anvil had long since stopped. The fire within Alistair's chest burned brighter than any ember, yet it could not replace the bitterness in his heart. "I will find them," he whispered under his breath, his voice barely audible over the wind. The vengeance he sought was within reach, and he would stop at nothing to see it fulfilled. The tavern was quieter than usual, the dim light from a few flickering candles casting eerie shadows across the worn wooden tables. The patrons, tired and battle-worn, whispered amongst themselves, eyes darting nervously toward the door. Alistair stepped inside, the door creaking open with a groan, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. He didn't care. His eyes swept over the crowd, searching for the one he had been told would be there. His heart pounded in his chest, but his expression remained impassive, like stone. In the corner, a figure with a hooded cloak sat alone, a tankard of ale in front of them. The stranger didn't flinch as Alistair approached. Instead, they lifted their gaze slowly, eyes locking with his. "I thought you would come," the stranger said, their voice cold and distant, but with a knowing edge. Alistair's fingers curled into fists at his sides, but he said nothing. He had come for answers, and this was the moment. The silence in the tavern was thick, every eye now on Alistair and the hooded figure. "You know why I'm here," Alistair said, his voice low but filled with undeniable intensity. The stranger gave a slight nod, and the room seemed to breathe a collective sigh, as if they too understood the gravity of the situation. "Vengeance is a dangerous thing," the figure replied, the faintest trace of a smirk tugging at the edge of their lips. "You're not the first to seek it here." Alistair's jaw tightened, his mind racing with thoughts of the ones who had wronged him, the ones who had left him with nothing but the thirst for revenge. "I've already lost everything," he muttered. "Nothing left to take." The stranger's eyes softened for a moment, but only for a heartbeat. "Then you understand what it truly costs," they whispered, their voice like the wind, cold, biting. The stranger leaned forward, their cloak shifting as they placed their hands on the table. "You're not alone in this, Alistair. There are others like you, others who've lost everything." Alistair's gaze remained fixed on the figure, his pulse quickening. "I'm not interested in a group. I came here for one thing, revenge." The stranger's smirk faltered, but only for a moment. "Revenge often consumes those who seek it," they warned, their voice growing softer. "It will leave you hollow." Alistair shook his head, his eyes hardening. "I'd rather be hollow than weak." The figure's lips parted, as if they were about to say something more, but they paused, studying Alistair for a long moment. "Then you'll walk the same path as the others," the stranger finally said. "And you will find what you're looking for. But be warned, Alistair. The cost of vengeance is not always what it seems." Alistair stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. The tavern went silent once again as he turned towards the door. "I don't need your warnings," he said coldly. The hooded figure watched him rise, their expression unreadable. "No one ever does," they murmured, as Alistair walked away. With each step, the door swung open, the cold wind rushing in from the outside. Alistair paused for just a moment, glancing back over his shoulder. "I'll find them," he declared, his voice carrying through the tavern, echoing off the wooden beams. The door slammed shut behind him, leaving the tavern in the thick silence that followed, broken only by the soft sound of the wind howling outside. The morning mist hung heavily over the forest as Alistair continued his journey, the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders. Each step took him deeper into the wilderness, where the trees grew tall and dark, their branches stretching toward the sky like gnarled fingers. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, but it did little to calm his restless mind. His eyes were focused, scanning every shadow as if expecting an ambush at any moment. He had come here for one reason, to find the leader of the bandits who had destroyed his home. The man's name was Calder. A name Alistair had repeated to himself 1,000 times, the taste of it bitter on his tongue. As the sun slowly rose behind the clouds, Alistair's hand rested on the hilt of his sword, his thoughts consumed by the vengeance he sought. "You won't escape me, Calder," he muttered. The forest, however, remained silent, as if it too was holding its breath, waiting for the storm to come. Alistair had been walking for hours, the silence of the forest pressing down on him like a heavy weight. Just as doubt began to creep into his mind, he spotted movement in the distance. A figure, cloaked and hooded, moving swiftly through the trees. It wasn't a bandit, but the presence of another traveler here was unsettling. The figure glanced over their shoulder, meeting Alistair's eyes for a brief moment before disappearing deeper into the woods. Alistair's instincts kicked in, and without a second thought he pursued them, his steps quick and silent. The forest seemed apart for him, the trees bending slightly as if guiding him toward the stranger. Alistair's pulse quickened as he pushed forward, knowing this was no coincidence. There was something familiar about the figure, something that made him uneasy. His thoughts raced. Was this another trap, or was this a sign? Only one way to find out. Alistair's pursuit was relentless. The forest now silent, except for the sound of his boots crunching over the damp leaves. He didn't know what he was chasing, but the urge to follow was overpowering. The figure ahead was quick, darting through the trees with a grace that was almost unnatural. As Alistair pushed forward, his breath came in ragged gasps, the adrenaline flooding his veins. The figure led him deeper into the forest, past crumbling ruins and forgotten paths. Finally, they stopped at a clearing where the trees parted, revealing a small stone altar. The figure turned to face Alistair, their hood falling back, revealing the face of a woman, strange, yet familiar. Her eyes met his with a calm intensity, as if she had been waiting for him. "You have been following me for some time," she said, her voice soft but commanding. "Do you seek the bandits or something else?" Alistair stared at the woman, his mind racing. He didn't know why she felt so familiar, but the connection was undeniable. She wasn't a bandit, but there was something in her presence that made him uneasy. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low but filled with suspicion. She tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "I am no enemy to you, Alistair," she replied, her tone smooth but firm. "I've been watching you for a long time, ever since you set foot in this forest." The revelation sent a chill down his spine. "Why?" Alistair asked, his grip tightening around the hilt of his sword. "Because I know what you seek," she said quietly. "And I know the price you will pay." Her gaze softened, almost pitying. "Revenge will not bring you peace, no matter how much you think it will." Alistair clenched his jaw, anger rising within him. "I don't need peace, I need justice." The woman's eyes grew distant, as if she were remembering something long past. "Then you will walk the same path as the others," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "And you will find what you seek, but not in the way you expect." The stranger's words hung in the air, and Alistair's world seemed to crumble around him. Calder's dead? His chest tightened as the weight of the revelation crushed him. The long, difficult journey, the sleepless nights, the days of walking through dense forests and treacherous paths, all of it had been for nothing. His legs felt weak, and his breath came in short gasps. The anger that had driven him now felt like a distant memory, replaced with an overwhelming emptiness. "I've spent years chasing him, and now he's dead," Alistair whispered, the words barely audible. The stranger's gaze softened, but only for a moment. "You're not the first to fall for Calder's lies," they said quietly, their voice almost pitying. "And you won't be the last. Vengeance consumes those who seek it." Alistair looked up at the stranger, a flash of defiance in his eyes. "I've already lost everything," he growled, his voice filled with the weight of his past. "What's one more thing to lose?" The stranger took a step back, their expression unreadable. Then you're already on the path of ruin. It's not too late to turn back. But Alistair stood tall, his grip tightening around his sword. I don't know how to turn back. The forest seemed to close in around Alistair as he trudged through the dense undergrowth. The encounter with the woman had left a lingering unease, but he had no time to dwell on it. The path he walked was becoming more treacherous, the ground muddy and uneven, the trees growing even taller and more menacing. His body ached from the days of travel, but his mind was set. There was no turning back. The village of Drakeston, the place he had once called home, was a memory now, a ruined, broken thing. His family, gone. His friends, gone. All because of one man. Calder Dal. A cold wind blew through the trees, causing the leaves to rustle and shake, and Alistair tightened his grip on his sword. The thought of Calder's cruel smile, the image of his men ravaging his village, only fueled the fire of vengeance within him. This ends now, Alistair muttered under his breath, each step taking him closer to the man who had caused so much destruction. Nothing would stand in his way. As the day wore on, the trees began to thin, and Alistair found himself on the edge of a cliff. Below him, a wide river cut through the land like a serpent, its waters dark and fast-moving. It was the perfect place to make camp for the night, but Alistair knew that he couldn't afford to waste time. Calder was still out there, and the longer Alistair waited, the further he slipped through his fingers. As he surveyed the area, his eyes caught a flash of movement on the far side of the river. A figure, dressed in black, stood at the water's edge, staring into the distance. Alistair's heart skipped a beat. Was this one of Calder's men? The figure did not move, and Alistair couldn't tell if they had noticed him. His instincts told him to approach cautiously, but something told him that this was not a coincidence. "Who are you?" Alistair called out, his voice carrying across the river, his hand instinctively gripping his sword tighter. The figure turned slowly, revealing a face partially obscured by a dark hood. They didn't speak at first, their gaze assessing Alistair with an unreadable expression. The silence stretched between them like an unseen force. Alistair's grip on his sword tightened, but he didn't make any sudden movements. After a long moment, the figure spoke, their voice low and steady. "I am not one of them," they said, a strange calmness in their tone. "But you are right to be cautious." Alistair's brow furrowed in confusion. "Who are you, then?" he demanded, stepping forward cautiously. The figure raised their hand slightly, as if to keep Alistair at a distance. "I am someone who knows what you are seeking," they replied, their eyes narrowing slightly. "And I can help you find it." The words hung in the air between them, but Alistair didn't lower his guard. "Why should I trust you?" he asked, his voice hard with skepticism. "Because I've seen the path you're walking," the figure answered simply, "and it will lead you to nothing but ruin." Alistair's mind raced, uncertainty clouding his thoughts. What was this figure's game? He had no time for games. He was here to exact his vengeance. The words the figure spoke, however, resonated in his mind. "It will lead you to nothing but ruin." Alistair shook his head, trying to dispel the nagging doubt that began to creep in. He had a purpose now, but something about the figure's presence unsettled him. "I don't need your help," Alistair said, his voice low and filled with warning. "I came here for one thing." The figure nodded slowly, their face remaining unreadable. "I know," they replied softly. "But vengeance is a dangerous road to walk alone." Alistair took a step forward, his gaze unwavering. "Then I'll walk it alone," he said, his voice final. "Get out of my way." The figure didn't move, but their eyes shifted briefly, as if they were considering something. "Very well," they said after a long pause. "But remember, you were warned." And with that, they turned and disappeared into the shadows of the forest, leaving Alistair standing alone, the weight of their words pressing down on him. Alistair stood motionless, his mind racing. "Calder's dead?" The words kept echoing in his mind, a dull, throbbing pulse of disbelief. The stranger's calm demeanor only made the revelation more jarring. The quest that had consumed him for so long suddenly felt like a fool's errand, a wild chase after a ghost. He had come so far, endured so much. The fires of vengeance had pushed him through the darkest of times, but now, what was left? His hands shook as the sword in his grip suddenly felt heavier than ever. He had no more answers, no more certainty. What now? The burning desire to see Calder suffer, to feel the sweet taste of retribution, seemed so distant now, like a forgotten dream. He had been chasing the wrong thing all along. The quiet weight of the stranger's words hung in the air, and Alistair knew, in the pit of his stomach, that everything he had sacrificed might have been for nothing. For a moment, he felt the darkness of doubt threatening to swallow him whole, but his resolve hardened. "I won't stop," Alistair muttered, almost to himself. "I'll still make them pay." Alistair continued through the night, his senses sharpened, his every step calculated. The forest had grown darker, the canopy above blocking out most of the moonlight, leaving him in near complete darkness. His only guide was the faint outline of the path ahead, and the cold wind that rustled through the trees. The distant howling of wolves carried on the wind, but Alistair didn't flinch. His mind was focused solely on his goal. His muscles ached, his body tired from the relentless journey, but he would not stop. He could feel it now, the pull, the burning desire for vengeance growing within him, like a fire consuming him from the inside. There was no turning back, no hesitation. As he pushed forward, the faint sound of movement reached his ears, soft footsteps crunching the fallen leaves. Instantly, he reached for his sword, his body going tense. Was it one of Calder's men? Or something else? The footsteps grew louder, closer, and Alistair braced himself. The rustling sound grew louder, and Alistair's eyes narrowed, scanning the darkness. He could make out nothing, but the sense of danger was palpable. His heart raced, and his hand tightened on the sword's hilt. "Show yourself," he called out, his voice carrying through the trees, demanding an answer. The forest fell silent in response, and for a moment Alistair felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Was it a trick? A trap? Then, out of the shadows, a figure emerged, moving with calculated precision. Unlike the mysterious figure he had encountered earlier, this one was armed, clad in dark leather armor with a dagger at their side. They stepped into the faint moonlight, revealing a pair of piercing eyes that locked onto Alistair's. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then the figure spoke, their voice soft but carrying a warning. "You're looking for Calder, aren't you?" they asked, their tone flat. "What makes you think you'll find him alive?" Alistair's eyes flicked over the figure in front of him, taking in the readiness of their stance, the quiet confidence in their movements. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice low and filled with suspicion. The figure's lips curled into a slight smirk, their gaze unwavering. "I'm someone who's seen many come looking for Calder," they replied. "And I've seen how they end." The word stung, a reminder of just how many had already fallen to Calder's cruelty. But Alistair wouldn't be like them. He couldn't afford to be. "I'm not here for some last words," Alistair said coldly. "I'm here for justice." The figure's smirk faded, and their eyes darkened. "Justice," they repeated, their tone taking on a bitter edge. "You think you're the only one seeking it? Calder is no simple man to bring down. He has powerful allies. He will not be found easily, even for someone as determined as you." Alistair's grip on his sword tightened, his resolve hardening. "I don't care who he has," he growled. "I will bring him down no matter the cost." The figure took a step closer to Alistair, their hand resting casually on the dagger at their side. "You'll need more than vengeance to survive what's coming," they warned, their voice taking on an almost sympathetic tone. "Calder's people are everywhere. He's not someone you can simply hunt down. He'll turn the very forest against you if he has to." Alistair's jaw clenched at the words. He had come so far, and no one, not this stranger, not anyone, was going to stop him. "I've been hunting him for years," Alistair said, his voice unwavering. "I've seen what his men can do, what they did to my family, my village. I will not stop until I make him pay." The figures studied Alistair for a moment, their expressions softening as if they could see the weight of his resolve. "Then you should know that vengeance will cost you everything," they said, their voice quieter now. "Everything." Alistair met their gaze firmly. "I've already lost everything," he said, his words final. "What's left to lose?" The figure stood there for a long moment before nodding slightly, as if understanding something unspoken. Then, without another word, they turned and disappeared into the trees, leaving Alistair standing alone in the moonlit forest, his thoughts as dark and stormy as the night around him. Alistair stood in the clearing, his sword still drawn, his body aching from the long days of travel and the emotional toll the journey had taken. The stranger's words weighed heavily on him. The cost of vengeance is not always what it seems. Could they be right? Was he truly walking a path of destruction? His heart burned with anger as the memories of his village, of his family, his friends, flooded his mind. They deserved vengeance, he thought, and I would be the one to bring it to them. But deep down, doubt began to gnaw at him. The forest around him felt eerily quiet, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and the distant sound of rustling leaves. He had lost so much, and yet it didn't feel like enough. No amount of vengeance would bring them back. The fire inside him flared once again, stronger than before. "I'm not going to stop," Alistair muttered to himself, his voice trembling with a mix of resolve and uncertainty. "I can't, not until it's done." The stranger's face remained unreadable as they nodded slowly. "Then go," they said softly. "But remember, vengeance does not grant peace, only more pain." Alistair's eyes flickered, but he didn't respond. He couldn't. The darkness in his heart had taken root, and there was no turning back. The forest stretched on endlessly, its dark expanse swallowing Alistair as he moved deeper into its heart. The warnings of the stranger still echoed in his mind. Vengeance will cost you everything. But Alistair wasn't the same man he had been before the destruction of his village. He had nothing left to lose. The deeper he traveled, the more the trees seemed to close in around him, their branches intertwining like twisted fingers. The ground was uneven, and the air was thick with the scent of earth and decay. A faint mist rolled across the path, the moonlight dimming as the clouds gathered overhead. It felt as if the forest itself was conspiring to keep him from his goal. But Alistair kept moving forward, each step bringing him closer to Calder. He had no idea where he was heading, but he knew one thing. No matter how deep the darkness, he would find the man who had caused him so much pain. And then, he would make him suffer. As the night grew colder, Alistair found himself at the edge of another clearing. The air was unnervingly still, the kind of silence that suggested something was watching him. He halted, his instincts telling him that he was no longer alone. His eyes scanned the darkness beyond the clearing, every muscle in his body tensed. He could feel it. Someone was near. Suddenly, from the shadows, another figure emerged, their movements swift and silent. This one was different from the others he had encountered. The figure wore no cloak, no armor. They were dressed in simple clothes, their face partly obscured by a bandana. Their eyes, however, were unmistakable, familiar, cold, and calculated. The man spoke without hesitation. "I know why you're here," he said in a low voice, his words dripping with a mixture of warning and amusement. "You're looking for Calder, but you won't find him in these woods, not alive anyway." Alistair's grip tightened on his sword as he took a step closer, the figure's words ringing in his ears. "What do you mean?" he demanded. "I'll find him one way or another." The stranger's smirk deepened, their posture relaxed as if they weren't facing a man driven by fury. "You're too late," they said with an air of finality. "Calder's already gone. Gone from this place. Gone from this world." Alistair's chest tightened, his pulse quickening. "You're lying," he spat. The strangers shook their heads slowly, their eyes never leaving Alistair's. "I'm not lying. Your vengeance is a fruitless pursuit." Alistair lunged forward, his sword raised, fury burning in his veins. "Tell me where he is," he roared. The figure didn't flinch. "I don't have to," they replied calmly. He's already dead. The words hit Alistair like a blow to the chest, and for a moment, the world seemed to spin. Dead? Dead, Alistair whispered. Then why was I chasing him? The stranger's words hung in the air, and Alistair's world seemed to crumble around him. Calder's dead? His heart pounded in his chest as he tried to process the news. All this time, everything he had endured, every step of this dark journey, it had all been for nothing? The stranger's voice cut through his thoughts. Vengeance is a fool's game, Alistair, they said softly. You don't know what you are chasing. Alistair's knees nearly buckled under the weight of the revelation. His breath came in short gasps, his sword hanging loosely at his side. I've lost everything, he whispered, his voice shaking. Everything? And for what? To find out it was all in vain? The figure stepped closer, their gaze softening for the first time. It's not too late to stop, they said gently. There's still time for you to choose a different path. Alistair stared at the ground, the sword in his hand suddenly feeling like a heavy weight he couldn't bear. Could he stop? Could he choose peace over vengeance? The silence stretched on, heavy with unspoken words. Alistair's mind was a whirlwind of confusion and doubt. His entire purpose had been to find Calder, to make him pay for the destruction he had caused. But now, the truth was staring him in the face. Calder was gone, and nothing would bring him back. What had he been fighting for? The fire of vengeance inside him still burned, but it felt hollow now. He looked up at the stranger, their face unreadable in the moonlight. What should I do? He asked, his voice almost breaking. The stranger regarded him for a long moment, then gave a slight nod. You still have a choice, Alistair, they said softly. You can choose to let go, or you can keep chasing shadows. Alistair's hands trembled around his sword, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a flicker of hope, an unfamiliar feeling. I'm not sure I can let go, he admitted. The stranger smiled, a small, sad smile. Then you'll need to find your own way. With that, they turned and disappeared into the forest, leaving Alistair standing alone. Alistair wandered deeper into the forest, the weight of the stranger's words still echoing in his mind. You'll need to find your own way. The path ahead was unclear, the shadows of the trees growing longer with each passing moment. He had been chasing vengeance for so long that it had become a part of him, a dark, consuming force that shaped his every action. But now, with the death of Calder and the empty promise of justice, Alistair felt lost. His resolve, once as firm as steel, now seemed brittle, cracking under the pressure of doubt. What was he really seeking? Was it vengeance? Or was it something else? The further he ventured, the more he felt the sting of his past, the faces of those he had loved and lost, the screams of his village burning in his memory. He stumbled over a root in the path, his knees hitting the ground with a harsh thud. What now? The question hung in the air, unanswered, as the forest seemed to close in around him. Alistair remained kneeling for a long while, the cool earth beneath him grounding him as he battled with his inner turmoil. His mind raced, he had nothing but vengeance to cling to, yet it had failed him. In the distance he heard the faint rustling of leaves, followed by the crunch of boots on the forest floor. A figure emerged from the shadows, silhouetted against the dimming light. Alistair rose to his feet, his hand instinctively going to his sword. But this time, there was no anger in his stance, no fury behind his eyes. The figure stepped closer, revealing a face Alistair had not expected to see. It was the woman from earlier, the one who had warned him about the dangers of vengeance. You're still here, she said, her voice carrying a strange mix of relief and sadness. I thought you might have turned back by now. Alistair didn't know what to say. The woman's presence felt different this time, softer, almost like a lifeline. I don't know what to do anymore, he admitted quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman stepped closer, her gaze gentle but firm. You can't keep running from your past, she said, her voice low and soothing. No matter how far you go, it will always follow you. Alistair looked away, unable to meet her eyes. What if my past is all I have left? He whispered. The woman's expression softened, a trace of sympathy in her eyes. "You have more than that," she replied. "You have the future. A future that doesn't have to be shaped by vengeance." Alistair clenched his jaw, the words stinging. A future. The thought seemed so distant, so unattainable. The fire of vengeance was still burning inside him, but now it felt like a distant memory, flickering weakly in the cold night. "I don't know how to let go," Alistair admitted, his voice tinged with frustration. The woman's eyes locked with his, her gaze piercing and understanding. "You don't have to let go all at once, but you can start by choosing a different path. A path that's yours, not one driven by hate." Alistair stood still, her words slowly sinking into his mind. A future. It was a foreign concept, something he hadn't allowed himself to think about since the fall of his village. His life had been defined by loss and rage, and now the idea of living without that drive felt like an impossible task. "How do I even begin?" he asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. The woman smiled faintly, her eyes calm. "You start by making the choice," she said simply. "It's not easy, but it's the first step toward healing." Alistair closed his eyes, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He had spent so long chasing vengeance, so long clinging to the past. Could he really let go of it? Could he turn toward something else? The answer wasn't clear, but as he stood in the quiet of the forest, something in him shifted. For the first time in a long while, he felt the tiniest spark of hope. "I'll try," he whispered, the words feeling almost foreign on his tongue. Alistair turned away from the woman, looking out into the forest ahead. The path was still unclear, but now it seemed less daunting. He had no idea where it would lead him, but for the first time he felt like he wasn't walking alone. The woman's presence, though silent, gave him the strength to take that first step. He didn't have all the answers, and he might never have them, but he was no longer solely defined by vengeance. A different path, he thought, his resolve firming. The weight in his chest, the one that had followed him for so long, felt a little lighter. The journey ahead would be hard, but at least now, it felt like it was his to shape. "Thank you," he murmured, though the words felt too small. The woman nodded without speaking, turning to disappear back into the shadows of the forest. Alistair turned back toward the path and walked forward, his pace steady and sure, the first steps toward a future he had yet to discover. The forest gradually gave way to rolling hills, and Alistair found himself walking along the edge of a vast, open field. The air had changed, the thick shadows of the woods receding behind him. As the sun began to rise, the light spread across the land, casting a golden hue over the landscape. It was a new day, but the heaviness of the past still clung to Alistair's thoughts. His mind kept returning to the loss he had endured, to the endless pursuit of vengeance that had consumed him. And yet, in the quiet of the morning, with the wind on his face and the open space before him, Alistair felt something he hadn't in a long time. Peace. He wasn't there yet, he knew. The journey ahead was still long, and his wounds, physical and emotional, ran deep. But the darkness that had once ruled his life seemed a little less overwhelming now. Each step forward felt lighter, and with every breath, it became easier to believe that a future could be built beyond the ruins of his past. Alistair walked through the open field, his eyes scanning the horizon. He had crossed into unfamiliar territory, away from the forest and the paths he had known. It was quiet here, the only sounds the rustling of the grass beneath his feet, and the distant call of birds overhead. Yet there was something unsettling about the stillness. As he walked, his thoughts wandered back to the woman in the forest, to her words about choosing a different path. He wasn't sure if he had fully understood what she meant, but for the first time, he felt like he was finally beginning to carve out a life that didn't revolve around the ghosts of the past. The ache of vengeance was still there, lingering beneath the surface, but it was quieter now. The desire for revenge had been replaced by a more pressing need, to find some semblance of peace in a world that had once felt so shattered. He didn't know what that peace would look like, but he would keep walking until he found it. The path led Alistair to the edge of a small village. The sight of it stirred something deep within him, a reminder of what he had once lost. But the village before him was quiet, serene. Children ran through the streets, laughing, while women hung laundry to dry under the warm sun. The people here seemed unaware of the violence and destruction that had scarred Alistair's past. For a moment, he wondered if this place could be his new beginning. He approached cautiously, not sure if he should linger or pass through. But as he walked, he realized that this village, though peaceful, could never erase the pain he had suffered. It was not here that he would find closure, nor would he find the answers he sought. Yet, there was something comforting in the simplicity of life that carried on, despite the shadows that still loomed over him. Perhaps this was a place to rest, a place to gather strength before continuing his journey. Alistair entered the village cautiously, moving past the marketplace where villagers exchanged goods, their faces full of warmth and life. The contrast between their vibrant existence and the bleak world he had come from struck him deeply. How could such simple lives continue when his own had been shattered? He walked through the village, his mind still swirling with questions. He passed a small group of farmers tending to their crops, their laughter rising above the chatter. It was in this small, seemingly insignificant place that Alistair began to realize the weight of his choices. Vengeance had consumed him, but life had continued. The children in the streets played as if the world was untouched by the horrors of the past. Perhaps that was the answer, to live, to let life go on, despite everything. He found a small bench near a fountain and sat down, allowing the sounds of the village to fill the empty spaces in his heart. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was a step closer. The sun had dipped below the horizon when Alistair stood up from the bench. He felt a quiet resolution within him. He had taken another step, not toward vengeance, but toward something else. A future. His past would always be a part of him, but it no longer defined him. He looked back at the village one last time, a soft breeze rustling the leaves around him. As he walked away from the village and into the unknown, a sense of peace settled over him. The future was not something he could control, but it was his to shape, and for the first time that thought brought him comfort. He would continue his journey, not for revenge, but for something more, perhaps for redemption, or maybe simply for a life that held meaning. Whatever it was his to find. And as the stars twinkled overhead, Alistair walked forward into the night, no longer chasing vengeance, but seeking peace.